Welcome to the Embracing Race podcast. All episodes were recorded in advance, so don't be alarmed if the timeline seems a little bit cattywampus.
Welcome to another episode of Embracing Race, Conversations with Truth and Intention. And we're excited because we have our friends. Okay, I just want to make sure that we are friends because we had one episode and I was like, do your friends call you by a shortened name, right? I don't want to call the guest us by. And she was like, well, my friends call me. I was like, well, are we friends? Because I didn't know where to go with that. I was like, my friends call me so-and-so. I was like, am I your friend? Can I call you this? Because I was getting ready to just by nature, just shorten her name. And I was like, that would be rude. Because some people like their whole name. Like, you know, if your name is Frederick, you might go by Fred. And it's so random, but it's just in my spirit.
All that to say, Shawnee's feeling insecure. Are you guys considered her friends?
I mean, I consider
clearing that up,
friends.
Jesse. Exactly where I was going.
All that to say, yes, we're all
to say,
friends here.
are we friends? Yes. Okay, so thank you, Heather and Chris, for coming on today. Just to, talk. And I do want to just name that, this is definitely, I want you to feel comfortable as we journey along in this conversation, but I think it will be so helpful for our listeners to hear from your perspective. And Jesse, before we get started, why don't you talk about why you think it would be helpful? Because you were kind of like the champion of bringing them on and getting them to say yes.
Yeah, so for those who are listening, we have Chris and Heather Deacon. Chris Deacon is the pastor at Northwood Presbyterian Church in Silver Spring. He's also the vice moderator of National Capital Presbytery, and his lovely wife Heather Deacon is the director of business affairs at National Capital Presbytery. So both super important, influential leaders within our presbytery. They might not say that of themselves, but we believe it and we know it to be true. And the topic that we wanted to bring forth to everybody today was to talk about transracial adoption. Since it is a little bit of a hot topic, and how sometimes, especially people who are white who adopt children of color, can come into a place of white saviorism. And Chris and Heather are both two people who have done serious work in dismantling white supremacy and who are taking it very seriously and who are working to combat that white saviorism. And we kind of just wanted to talk about how they've navigated their adoption journey, adopting their child who is an African American child, and the importance of doing your work, and how even if you do adopt a child who is either cross-culturally or cross-racial from you, that does not absolve you from the responsibilities that come of ending white supremacy. And Heather and Chris are just wonderful people, and we wanted to bring them on to be able to share some of their journey with us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Of course. So I guess our first question for you all would just be how did your adoption journey come to be?
So our path to our family was not an easy one. We had several sort of hard moments, right, leading up to our family, we kind of went into it from that perspective. Like, it didn't matter, when you go through adoption, right? You have to fill out all these really uncomfortable questionnaires, right? What are you willing to accept? That's how they like to phrase it. Like, what are you willing to accept? And it's literally a checklist, and you check off health things, race things, economic things. It's not it's
It's almost
startling, right?
it's almost
I think,
degrading. Like, of
yeah,
course I
Yeah,
would.
it is.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Exactly. I would say, and in our like just naive eagerness, right, to just start a family, we just checked, right? We're like, we'll just yes, 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 yes. And I would say that at the beginning, I'm not sure that we really fully grasped the responsibility that comes from like those check marks, right? That I would say that for myself. I don't want to speak for Chris, but I know I didn't fully grasp it. And then it was a long wait. It was a long wait with lots of starts and stops until Hannah was born. Chris, do you want to add anything in there?
Sure. I was about to say that the checklist was degrading, but also forced us into some uncomfortable, but necessary conversations. As far as race, do we have a community that would be supportive, whether that's friends, family, neighbors, with health issues? What are we capable of doing? What are we, willing to do? Would we accept, someone, with Down syndrome? Would we accept someone with a disability where they'll need care their whole life? Would we, all sorts? And I think we had more conversations about the health than the race. But yeah, I agree with Heather that we didn't fully comprehend at the time what a cross-cultural or interracial adoption would entail.
And so now that you've kind of obviously not come out on the other side, there's no such thing as that in parenting. But now that you have a child who is African American, what does that look like? Having gone through that process of we didn't fully comprehend and now we're here, what does that look like for you now?
It's been a continuing journey, and it's one, we were reluctant to come and speak with y'all, not because we don't love you, not because we don't value the important work that we're doing, but because we didn't feel qualified, because we are by no means experts and we are still learning each and every day. What it means to raise a child of a different race than you. And I had one person who I connected with who said, if you're going to enter into transracial adoption, you need to be prepared to do PhD level work and really just study and dig down. And that's, we read books on books, we talked with friends, and it really led to like completely changing our lives. When Hannah, our daughter, was born, we lived in a small town in rural Illinois. I joke that the town had a 10-year plan of getting a stoplight. It was they were 2,200, 2,300 people. And being the pastor, they all knew me the day before I moved in. I was also a volunteer firefighter, but it was also one of the widest places I'd ever lived. And when we adopted Hannah, we said, we do not want her to be the Black child. We do not want that to be her identity. And it was also my ministry at that particular church was coming to an end. So we started looking and saw a church in Prince George's County and thought, this is where we need to be. The church seemed like a match. The region seemed like a match. So we picked up and completely, moved everything to come here to enable her to be around people she looks like, to enable her to have those racial mirrors, to go to a doctor that's Black, a dentist that's Black, to have, not have to drive 45 minutes to go to a hair place.
We talked about that, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
I am sitting here thinking like the first thing I hear in your answers is humility, right? Like this humble spirit of, I want to do what's best for my child, which is what every parent, going into it wants to do, right? And I feel like the two of you made a decision to be uncomfortable rather than having your child be uncomfortable. And I think that I really do think that should be lifted up in your story, because more often than not, that's not the case. people are we settle into how we feel as adults or individuals and expect the child to live into that, but you did it a different way. And I think is that just based on like reading the materials before, or you just knew that, like it just felt like that was the better way to go?
I mean, I think that it was both, right? I mean, so when you are reading and you're talking to people about their experiences and you're hopefully listening, right? You're hopefully listening to what people are saying, and it was always lifted up that these children that were adopted into these white families lived in white places, and they didn't know how to connect with who they were. They didn't know how to navigate those spaces. And I think we just thought there's so many things that we aren't going to be able to give and do, right? I can't give and do a lot of things. So what are the places that we can? Like, what are the places that we can? And it felt like moving to a different place was easy. When you looked at all the things you can't do, this was an easy thing that we can do. So I think it came from both from reading, but also just listening to people's lived experiences.
Yeah, I would add to that, reading, going with instinct, and some of the social justice work we'd done, and talking with our friends of color, but also networking, like especially in the beginning, Facebook, we found some very valuable groups, that groups of transracial adoptive families, groups that were designed to help you live more into Black culture, aimed at white families. I remember one of the biggest moments for me was Hannah was 1 or 2 days old. We were still in the hospital with her, and they were coming in and out and getting her for various tests. And this one young Black nurse came in with a white nurse to get her for something, and she stopped, and you could tell she was a little uncomfortable, a little reluctant. And then she said, "Would you like me to give you some hair tips?" And we're like, "Yes, please." And I remember very little about what she said, except like no chemicals until she's old enough to decide for herself. But it's like, we can't do this on our own. We need to build community. We need to network. We need to tap into, the networks we have. But we also need to be willing to do the work and not rely on the emotional labor of our friends who are Black and people of color.
That's so funny, because my very first job, I worked at this bake shop in my small town. I was the only Black girl. And so I was probably like 15 or 16. I was the dishwasher there. And the bake shop was run by an interracial couple. And I used to think that my supervisor didn't like me. She was the baker, but she only came in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. But every time she would come, she would stare at me. She'd just stare, right? And then finally, I was on my break, and I was drinking. I loved her. She had the best peanut butter blossoms, and we could eat all the baked goods we wanted to while we were on the clock, but we had to pay for like food 50% off. So I would get full off peanut butter blossoms. And Barb came up to me one day, and she's like, "I know you're probably thinking I'm crazy because I keep looking at you, but I've been so scared to ask you this question." And I'm like, "What's the question?" She's like, "I don't know how to do Lainey's hair." And Lainey was her 2-year-old, right? And she had an older son, but his hair didn't come out like Lainey's hair, right? It was just a whole different texture. And I was like, "Oh, girl, I got you." That's so funny. So like from like the next 2 years until I went away to college, I helped her do her daughter's hair. It was so funny, but yeah. And
this is an area of ignorance for me, is I didn't realize the cultural significance of especially Black women's hair. So that was and I'm going to give props to Heather. Like, she has gone above and beyond to learn. She styles Hannah's hair most of the time. She braids it. She knows all the different names. I don't. I tried, and Hannah was very tender-headed, and I was the daddy. I'm like, well, I can't hurt my little girl, and we do take her to get her hair done several times a year, just more for the cultural experience as anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But Heather started styling. She's taken classes. She's read books. She had a friend come over, and the first time Hannah's hair was braided, her friend braided it and showed Heather how to do it. And then Heather took it over, and it's been a process.
What was that like for you, Heather? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, so I can be really honest, right?
We want you to be very honest.
I know. Well, and it's one of those things, it's one of those moments I'm not proud of, but I hope it shows growth, right? And that's what we want to do, to show that you can grow. I remember we had several adoptions that didn't work out before Hannah. We never had any children placed in our homes. We had several that didn't quite work out. And I remember talking with one of my friends before, when we thought we were going to get a baby, and we didn't know that we were going to go find out the sex of the child, right? And we were walking the track. We were walking, and I was like, one of the things I'm really worried about if it's a girl is I won't be able to sit there and French braid her hair and put it in pigtails, and and so that was where I started, right? And then when they put Hannah in my arms, I realized how silly that was, because Hannah and I spend a lot of time. I do all kinds of things with Hannah's hair, and it's super intimidating, right? But it's also that thing that you have to do. It's I made a commitment to be Hannah's mom, and there's a lot of things, again, that I can't do, but I sure can send her to school with her hair done and people not say, well, there's that child with white parents who don't know how to take care of her hair, right? So it means people come up to me in the store and they give me advice, and I just take it, right? Thank you, right? Thank you. I appreciate everything. And it means asking questions when you don't want to seem silly, but who benefits from me asking questions? Hannah does. Who doesn't benefit from me keeping my mouth shut? It just hurts Hannah. So it just have to get used to being uncomfortable. It's been intimidating, but it's also been a thing that we've been able to connect over, right? Hannah sits in between my legs, and I do her hair. And I just think back to when I was afraid that I wouldn't have that, and just how silly that was, because we have that.
That's awesome. So people strangers come up to you in the store and tell you how to do her hair? Oh, wow.
Oh yes. Strangers come up to us all the time and have all kinds of things to say to us. The things that have been said to us are many, many, many.
Can you talk about them? Are you comfortable talking about them? You don't have to if you don't want to.
I would say from my experience, and they've been more positive than negative. I, especially from the Black community here, I always get a little apprehensive when someone approaches us, obviously wanting to say something. I remember one time very clearly, we're waiting for a metro. I can't remember what we were doing. We're in DC heading home, and this older Black gentleman came up and goes, "Is that your daughter?" And I was like, "Yes, sir." He goes, "I just want to say, I think this is absolutely beautiful, and thank you." And so I get that sentiment more than anything else. But that's my personal experience. And Heather may have had other things.
Yeah, I mean, I think people stop in the store. Oh, her hair looks so pretty. Do you do it? Right? People don't believe that I do it. And I do, right? And I just, yep, I did it. Thank you. There have been times that it hasn't, people don't have nice things to say, or they have well-intentioned things to say that are absolutely offensive. We had
what a lucky little girl to have you as her parents.
Yeah. And we're like, well, we feel like we're pretty lucky, but there's a lot in there, right? And that's,
Right.
that's what we try. And that's usually my response. We feel like we're the lucky ones, but there's a whole lot in there. Not because I want to like start something with somebody in the milk aisle, right? But I do want them to understand that there is a lot more involved in this than just someone being lucky, right? Like that's really not what this is about.
And I always try to respond. I don't always, but most of the time I try to respond gracefully and try to look at their intentions rather than, but every once in a while I've had enough. And I remember one time, Hannah was little. She's maybe a year old, and we went to Costco, and can't remember if we were standing in line, but this older white woman came up and she goes, "Oh, she is just beautiful. Is she for sale?" or something to the extent. And I just looked at her and said, or where can I get one? And I said, "Ma'am, it's been illegal to sell Black people in this country for a long time." And she goes, "That's no," but and then she kind of just slunked away,
That's just wild. Sometimes people don't know what to say. I don't even know.
So you
I don't even know what
say
to
nothing.
say.
If you don't
Just
know
say
what to say, just
Right.
keep your mouth shut.
Yeah, like it costs you nothing to be quiet.
Right.
Mhm.
And Hannah hears, right? That's the thing also that we have to be aware of. Hannah hears how we react in those situations. And so we're teaching her
Mm-hmm.
in those moments as well.
Yeah.
So what does that look like for you all? Because as her parents, I imagine in moments like that where people say stupid, disgusting things in front of your child and you are trying to like keep your cool, but your instinct is to just like lose your damn mind or lose your shit on them. Like, how do you navigate those spaces when you want to lose your shit on somebody? How do you not do that? Asking as a parent, looking for advice. How do you not do that?
I mean, for me, and I can't speak for Heather, and she's better at not losing her shit than I am. Although I tend to do it more subtly and snarky and just like, "I'm gonna put you in your place, but I'm gonna say it with a smile on my face." It's Southern bless your heart. I remember that Heather or Hannah is sitting there watching and learning everything. I try to remember that hopefully they're coming from a place of good intention and they just lack education. And I was there at one point, maybe not to the extreme of some of the dumbass stuff that some people have said, but I'm on a continual journey of growth and learning, and they're at just a different starting point.
And I would also say that there have also been times where I just open my mouth. and Hannah needs to see that too, right? Like,
Yeah.
that I'm also not afraid to say, do we have a problem?
Mm-hmm.
And you can say that in a way that is respectful, but also lets people know that you're not just going to take what's being dished out.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But an important component of that is something both Heather and I have started doing is, as Hannah's gotten older, is understanding more, not just hearing more. Once we're in the car or wherever, we say, "Do you want to talk about this? What are you feeling?" And try to engage her in conversation. So it's a place of growth for her as well.
I love it. Can we just talk about like how was it like I guess getting like your family, like what did you have any resistance there once Hannah came home, or did you have to let them know beforehand, or did you just say, "Guess who's coming home for dinner"? Like, was it kind of that like a surprise encounter, or?
In many ways, it was a surprise. We've been in the adoption journey for a while. We found out that Hannah's first mother had chosen us to adopt 3 days before Hannah was born.
Okay.
And we did let our families know, but other than that, we kept under wraps because, as Heather said, we had several adoptions fall through for different reasons, and we shared those publicly. And then it was very hard to go afterwards and say, "It's not happening. They changed their mind. They're going to parent. They're going to go with another family," whatever reason. So it wasn't widespread, but, we had a few close friends and our family knew, and everyone else learned the day she was born. Like, it's like, all right, this is actually happening. So we did talk to our family before. There was little resistance. There was some education that had to go on afterwards. And again, it's just, ignorance and learning. This wasn't just family, this was friends. It's like, no, yes, I know that monkey onesie is really cute, but you are not buying that for our daughter, or we will not accept that. Or, oh yeah, that's cute, it's got watermelons over it. No way. Yes, my nephew wore something exactly like it. That's different. People don't see that and assume anything, where with a Black child that people might read into it, or it just reinforces racial stereotypes, racial tropes that we don't want her to have to deal with, and it's easily avoided. So some of those things, educational wise. Heather, did you have anything to add? Or
no, I mean, I was just going to say, I think the education pieces was big and just ongoing, right? Because I don't think anyone that is currently in our lives now comes from anything but really well-intentioned places. But that can, you still have to be cognizant that you can hurt people from a well-intentioned place, right? And we have fantastic family relationships with the people in our lives right now. And so I don't think of any of them as unsafe, right? But also the folks that we do consider to be unsafe aren't a part of our life anymore, right? And that's that line that we drew.
And I guess it goes back. Oh, go ahead, Jesse.
That's okay. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it just goes back to the what you said earlier, Heather, about who benefits from this decision, right? This is beautiful.
How do you create those boundaries in your life of, like, what does that look like, especially for people that you trust or whatever? Like, even in my life as a queer parent, it's not the same thing, but like bringing people into your life that's going to be around your son or your child or whatever it is, that are unsafe. How do you navigate those spaces of saying, no, this is a clear boundary. I'm not going to let you put my child in a space that they don't feel safe around you. How do you navigate that?
I mean, I would say that I think a lot of it depends on the situation, right? And if we think that there's a, and I don't want to say that this is a situation, but hypothetically speaking, if we were at church, right, and there was someone that we thought to be unsafe, then we're just not going to put our child in a position where there's going to be like interactions or one-on-one interactions, right? At this point in our life, we can just be present. So our presence alone can be a boundary. And then for situations where just a person is unsafe, we just have to say, we're not going to be a part of this, right? We're just not. I think it is situational. And for me, I think often we do it by presence, right? And then we're not going to invite someone that we consider to be unsafe to have a deeper relationship with our family, right? So once we've identified you as an unsafe person, your access is going to be stopped, right? We're just not going there.
Right.
I don't know, Chris, if you have anything to add there.
Sure. And it's changed over the years. When we lived in Illinois, there were a lot more unsafe people. I was a volunteer firefighter, and the only time I've almost gotten into a fight as an adult was with another firefighter who was making racist comments 3 weeks after Hannah was born. And we were all standing outside, and he said something, and I just looked at him. I said, "You want to repeat that?" And he looked at me and did. I said, "Would you like me to go get my daughter and bring her, and you could say it to her?" And he's like, "Well, yeah, sure. Why not?" And he could tell by the way I kind of reacted that, he's like, "Oh, well, maybe not," and I finally just took a deep breath and walked away and, said, well, that's one family that, is not going to be around Hannah anymore. And he did later come up and apologize after some of his extended family was like, "Oh, I'm sorry for him. That's just how he is." And he came up and said, I really am sorry. I thought about it, and that was, uncalled for and not right. And yeah, I wish he was apologizing, because he was being a piece of shit racist, but instead of like being a racist to someone with a black child, which is what I think he was really apologizing for. But then since moving to Prince George's County, we're able to build a much safer community. Like a significant number of our friends are Black. Many of, I'd say most of Hannah's friends, 75% are Black. And that's not to say that, every Black family is safe, but you don't have to worry about some of the same things. So it's more of a safer community.
Yeah. And I think there has to be, we have to hold, I'm all about transparency here. And I think also, even within Black families and communities, there is, I wouldn't call us racist, but there is some bias and prejudices. And a lot of people have, strong opinions on white people adopting Black children in particular, right? That's like a big deal. Not quite sure. I can't really speak on the whys in that. Like, I didn't really do research, but I do understand to an extent, because there's no, for the people that have had arguments that were reasonable in my mind of not educating themselves on or not putting their children in spaces where they could see diversity and only having one lens, I could see where there would be a complaint on that. I also do also understand how, and you guys could probably speak more about that because I've never adopted anybody, but I do know that the adoption process is very, very hard. And it's very hard to it's much easier. And I don't know why. Do you know why it's easier for white couples to get children outside their own race? Is it quicker? But you said the process was long, and it was still a long process. But is that why people go to Korea or what have you? I don't know. Can you speak on that?
We briefly talked about international adoption, but we decided very quickly against it.
Okay.
As far as why it's quicker to get a Black child or a Hispanic child than a white child, it sounds terrible, but it's because more people want white children. And there are people that when they get that checklist will check only white. And it's supply and demand for, I hate putting that term on people, but for lack of a better term, that's what it is. And they said the more things you have checked on that checklist, the quicker it's going to happen.
Okay.
Because it eliminates, each check is, oh, well, that's a child that you might have been chosen for, but won't be.
Yeah. And, building on that, I think that there's a huge amount of racism that's built and baked into that, right? When you have you have a population that has historically been mistreated and not given access to resources, right? Then that's just there, right? That is just a piece of it. And then adoption happens in the Black community all the time, right? It just doesn't happen through all of the paperwork, right?
Right.
And so I think we have to name that as a thing as well. And it's expensive to adopt. So again, we have who has had access to privilege, right? In this situation, to have the resources to be able to navigate that system. It is a system that is deeply rooted in white privilege and racism, right? On both sides of it. It's baked all the way through it. And I think to not name that as what it is, right? Even though our family has, our little family unit has benefited from it, right? Like we have our child, we have a family because of it. It still has to be acknowledged, right? That that's there, and that's a piece of it, a huge piece.
thank y'all for coming to talk about this, because I just think that it will help people that might even be on the like verge of maybe thought about it, and like, what do you need to do and how do you prepare yourself? And I appreciate the hesitance, the pause on wanting to make sure that this was the right thing to do, and then finally saying yes. So I do thank you for your yes. Jesse, you have any questions?
Yeah, I just keep thinking about there's this clip that I saw not long ago of Sandra Bullock, who did an interview, who has two adopted Black children, speaking very candidly about the fact that, and emotionally as well, that she has this insight that millions of white mothers, she spoke from a mother's perspective, but millions of white parents don't have, of raising Black children and having this perspective that for hundreds of years, Black mothers and Black fathers and Black parents have had to live with this scary experience of raising their children in a world that doesn't appreciate them or love them. And the phrase that she used was that they've never been able to settle into motherhood or parenthood. And I wanted to know if any of that resonated with you, especially, in the last 3 years, especially since George Floyd passed. But I mean, Hannah's 10 years old, 10?
Just turned 10 on Sunday.
Yeah, 10 years old. The last decade or so has been rife with racial tension, even in our backyard in Baltimore. Like, how have you all settled into parenthood? Or have you settled into parenthood?
I mean, I feel like I've settled into parenthood. I feel like, being Hannah's father is a key defining factor of who I am at this time. It's not the one, but it's one of many. Like, if I were going to pick identifiers, like, all right, give us 4 traits that tell us who you are, that would be one of them. But yeah, it's been difficult. We've had to have some difficult conversations, and you hear about families having to have the talk with their kids, not the sex talk, but like Black families, when they have the talk, it's about police and safety. And that was difficult for us because we were raised white privilege. The cops are there to help you, the cops, and trying to balance that versus what's going on around us, and that Hannah is going to be at risk in a way that we were not. And then, complicating that is one of our great friends, and her best friend's dad is a Black police officer. So in some ways that helped. But after George Floyd's death, we took Hannah to a rally in Bowie that I was speaking at, that organization I'm part of helped to organize, and invited she wanted to invite one of her friends, and he came, white child, white parents. And afterwards, he was just in tears, like inconsolable. He just didn't understand. He hadn't been exposed to it. He didn't know, why are they saying Black Lives Matter? What about white lives? What happened to this person? And he just hadn't been exposed to that, where, we have had no choice but to address it. Like, we've tried to be very cognizant of Hannah's consent, her maturity, and her level to engage. So we did not bring up race until she started to notice it and bring it up. Even before we came on here, we said, Hannah, we've been asked to be on a podcast. And luckily she was just interviewed for a podcast like a week or 2 ago. And so she knew what that was. And I said, but it's about being your parents, about being white parents of a Black daughter. Are you okay? Is there anything you don't want us to tell? Would you rather us refer to you by your name or as our daughter? Asked her, and we talked about it. She gave us permission because it's more her story than our story.
And I think it's a test. Oh, go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
So we've had all sorts of conversations that families of the same race do not have to have. We've had the nights when she wakes up crying, saying she wants to be white, because her parents are white.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked through that. And I remember telling her, and this really blew her mind, and it really kind of brought things to perspective. I said, well, sometimes I wish I was Black. And she goes, what? Why? I said, because I'm raising a Black daughter and I don't know what it's like to be Black. So I can't be there for you. I can't show up for you in that way.
So I also recognized in this interview of how great your communication is between the two of you, and then how the way you communicate. Like, one of the things I just want to lift it up, maybe because I didn't do this in my marriage, and I was like, oh, this is a tip. So when I get married again, I don't want to speak for you, Chris, and I don't want to speak for Heather. I love that. And then you was like, Hannah, is there anything you don't want us to share? I just love the way that y'all talk to each other. It's so mature in so many ways.
Well, thank you. I don't know what else to say.
I thought we were friends, and now you're throwing around words like mature.
20 plus years of practice to get there.
Yeah. Oh, how long have y'all been?
20 years in May.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so, like, just to piggyback on what Chris said, I think that the added layer for our family in that has been that when we talk to Hannah about this, then she looks at us and she says, but you're white, right? And so just having to be able to hold space for, how, and that makes this hard, right? Because we don't know what it's like, but we aren't going to hurt you. You know what I mean? Like those type of things. That's just naturally where a kid's mind goes. So that's just that kind of added layer on there. That's real for our family. And I think the way we've just sort of navigated it, kind of what you said, Shawnee, is just have space to to say how you're feeling. Like, just have to know that it's okay to feel those things and to be confused by it, because we're confused by it too sometimes. Right? We definitely, there have been moments where I'm like, I have reacted really wrong to this situation. And wish I could do it over again, right? Like, I want to do over. I know better and I want to do over. Can we do it again?
Yeah.
What is your advice, or even just like, what do you all do? Because being a parent is heavy in and of itself. When you have those emotional moments, and Shawnee, I would love to hear your perspective too, of like, this is just too much. How do I do this? How do I parent in this moment? Where do you all go in those times?
Great.
The liquor store? No, I'm just
I was like, what?
For me, Heather's the first place I go. Like when Hannah and I have had a difficult conversation or a difficult experience, we will wait till Hannah's asleep or not around, and we will, I will say, I want first to inform her in case, some of those underlying issues come her way as well. But also just to talk through it and to parse out, okay, I handled this okay. All right, I could learn to do better here. And the community we built, we depend a lot on them.
I know for me, I have really tried. I realized that my life experience is so vastly different from my kids. I grew up in small town America. We went to the Rotary Club on Thursdays because my grandfather was a member, and had spaghetti dinners for $5, right? That's my childhood. And so to live in DC for the past 25 years and to raise all of my children here is just a different life experience. And I remember, I wasn't going to bring this up, even though it came to my mind when you were talking earlier, Chris, about not having to talk about, you guys have to have conversations that Black families don't. Not the same type of conversation, but I remember my 14-year-old, when she was 5, wanted to be white. And because she was the lightest one in the house. So she used to think that she was white. And so and I don't think I really, looking back on it, I don't know if I handled that situation like right at the, like it was like, I was more like, but why, instead of coming from a place, I was like, you'll never be white. Like, I was like, but I probably should have been a little more empathetic, like, ask the probing questions. I don't think I was a coach back then, so I didn't have that skill set, but I do remember saying to Michaela at the time, I said, but Black is so beautiful. It's so beautiful. It comes in different shades, right? But this is after, like, I'm like, you'll never be white. Like, and I was just like, so crazy. But, but what that experience taught me is that I needed to do more of reinforcing what my mother did. And I think my mother, looking back on it, I think she did a more intentional job because I was the only Black girl, because I didn't have any representation. So my mother overemphasized Blackness in my house. And I've never really felt like I needed to do that because we were always around Black people. But I think it still starts at home. Like, I still think you need that confidence built in at home. So then it can translate into something greater going on. And so I was intentional. I started changing the artwork in our house. I started so she could see light-skinned Black women that looked like her, right? So she could see her grandmother was light-skinned, right? Like this, like it just didn't come out of it just wasn't poof, right? It's a reason why your skin is like this, right? This wasn't accidental. And I needed to let her know that so that she could feel good in her skin, right? Does that answer your question, Jessie? Because I don't know if I did.
I just wanted to know. And I mean, I think celebrating your children in general, like, I know for me, we tell Toby all the time, like, Tobes, you're awesome. We love you. And I know, Heather, you're really good about doing this. And, like, obviously I know, Chris, you are too, but my experience is being in person with Heather when Hannah would come to the office throughout the day, like multiple times a day. Anytime Heather would leave or come into her office and Hannah was there, multiple times a day, it would just be a pause in the conversation to say, hey, you're awesome. Hey, I love you. Hey, you're great. Hey, you're amazing. And it was a 4-hour increment of time, and the number of times that you said, I love you, or you're awesome, or hey, you're amazing, like, I can't even count them. And I think that repetition of reinforcing that love of, you are amazing, you are wonderful, hey, I love you so much, hey, you're such a great kid, like, that repetition, I think kids need to hear that, especially with everything that's going on in the world right now. Like, I modeled how I react with my child based on how you reacted with Hannah, of like that positive reinforcement constantly.
Yeah.
So
she has now told me that she'd like me to not say those things out so much.
She's reached that age.
That was the revelation that got shared this weekend. So I don't know. That'll be hard for me.
It would just be great to just like kind of normalize what families look like, normalize, even for you, Jessie, like normalize you know, a trans family and all of that, right? And trans, non-binary, whatever. And it reminds me of this movie that just recently came out, Knock at the Cabin. And the two main characters is a gay couple. And the little girl is playing and she meets somebody. I won't give the movie away if y'all into M. Night Shyamalan's movies. But anyway, so the guy says, so when you have two dads? And she says, yeah, but it's like no big deal. Dad Eric and Dad Andrew. Like, she's like, but it's no big deal. But everybody makes it a big deal, including my teacher. Every time she sees me, she says, Win, I can't believe you have two dads. And this 7-year-old is like teaching us in the movie theater, like, let's normalize what it means. Like, there's no nuclear family. Stop. Like, we don't even take home ec anymore, right? That's where you learn that. Like the nuclear family and home economics. They don't even take it. So let's get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I look to children to see our, hope for so many of the societal issues. One example is before COVID, both Heather and I would volunteer in Hannah's classroom, especially when she's in kindergarten, because the teacher had way too many students. And we were both there. I was there once a week. Were you there once or twice a week?
I was there once a week. I was there on Thursday.
So we were both there once a week. And like her classmates, when they would find out that, I can't speak for Heather, but when they find out I was her dad, they're like, but you're white. I don't know. Why is that? And they had so many questions, but they were coming from such an honest place and they really wanted to learn. And, we talked about it and they just accepted it. Hannah, I look at, Jesse, when we first started getting close, I would misgender you. I'd use she on accident a couple times. And like, I remember once Heather and I were in the living room talking, Hannah was in the playroom and you'd come up and I was like, oh, what's she doing? And Hannah goes, they, Dad, it's they. And it's like, he gets it. I'm middle-aged white dude. I'm learning, but she gets it. And, she was teaching me. So it's like just coming from these places of honesty and wanting to learn and even not being afraid to correct us when we're in the wrong.
Yeah. Yes, because this generation is on it. Like Michaela is always, every time I misgender someone, she corrects me every single time. And it was funny because the first time they met Jesse, and I was saying something about, Jesse, and they had not met. Have my kids met you in person yet? I don't think they have, right? But Michaela never forgets a name. So she's like, Jesse goes by they, them. I said, yes. She said, that's what's up. I'm like, okay.
I remember meeting Hannah the first time and the conversation that came out of that, of you asking me, Heather, what my prefix was. It's not Miss and it's not Ms. It's not Mrs. So what do you want to be called? And that came from Hannah. That wasn't from Heather. It was, what do I call Jesse? And it's Mix, M-I-M-X. And ever since then, we've known each other for almost 2 years now. Hannah still calls me Mix Jesse. And like, never has messed up once.
I love it.
And that came from her, which is so awesome. Like that she thought, well, I can't call them Miss. Like that's right. Not okay.
Right. Right. I love
they had just learned about prefixes, like in school too. Like it had just, so the timing was perfect, right? Like, Mom, you gotta help me here. I don't know what to say. I was like, I don't either, but I'm gonna ask and I'm gonna let you know.
I love it. I don't even use prefixes. Like, I don't.
And then there's some people that use two, like, or Reverend Dr. Christy.
Oh. I mean, well, if you're a Reverend Doctor, you should. I just feel like
just own that shit.
I mean, exactly. I mean, come on now. Well, thank y'all for. Go ahead.
Okay, go.
I was gonna say, born and raised in the South, right? There's just some things that are hard for me. I'm like, we don't call adults by their first names. Like, you gotta put something in there.
I totally agree. I mean, like it was so funny because I was just talking to my best friend yesterday because I was like, you called, because she called my mother Pat. This was you. And I was like, her name is Miss Pat. And then my mother says, no, Shawnee, Nicole could call me Pat. And I was so upset because I could never call her mother Ruth. It had to be Miss Ruth. It could not be anything other than. So, yeah.
All right. So we've reached that point in our interview. We've had a lot of deep conversations. Now we get to do some lighthearted stuff. And there's two of you. So you've watched or listened to the podcast, so you might have your answers ready to go. So I added one extra question for you. There are now 12 questions. All right. Rapid fire. Don't think about it. Just say it. Go-to beverage.
Coffee.
Milo's Diet Sweet Tea.
Diet sweet tea and coffee. Is that what you said, Heather? All right. Favorite streaming platform.
We hit them all.
I don't know. Whatever I'm watching at the time is on. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I like Disney because it gives us the Marvel and Star Wars. Hulu, I like to rewatch old shows. Peacock, we just got into Yellowstone. So, I mean, we kind of hit them all depending. Netflix has some great kids stuff, some original kids stuff that they're putting out that's been fantastic.
I know which one is not my favorite. Can that be the question?
Yeah, least favorite streaming platform. Go.
So not because of content, but HBO Max, because their ability to like not crash, like it crashes all the time.
Yes,
it crashes
100%.
So that is my least favorite, HBO Max, but only because it crashes, not because of the content.
Yes, 100%. I know the answer to this one. Spotify or Apple Music?
Neither.
I don't know either. NPR?
I use Amazon Music.
Amazon.
Is what I use.
Amazon. All right.
I listen to podcasts on Stitcher and audiobooks on Audible and NPR. I'm such a nerd.
Fun fact, you can listen to our podcast on Audible too. Just going to plug that real quick. I know the answer to this one.
And Amazon Music.
And Amazon Music. I know the answer to this one. iPhone or Android?
Android.
Yeah, I know. Disney or Nickelodeon?
Disney.
Yep.
Both of you? Concert or comedy show?
They're both too expensive now.
Yeah.
Like we were going to try to go see Beyonce, and tickets were $300 a piece, and then we're like, all right, well, we'll do a comedy show instead. And Tina Fey and Amy Poehler are coming. Those tickets were $250 a piece, and we're like, all right, we're staying home and watching our favorite streaming network,
Right.
HBO Max.
I guess I'm going to say comedy only because I feel like I can watch that at home, right? That's going to translate better at home than a concert would. And right now we can't afford to go to either, apparently.
All right, leftover pizza. Are you going to heat it up or eat it cold?
Cold.
Heat it up.
What is something that gives you hope?
The kids. I talked about that a minute ago.
Yeah. What's one goal that you each have for the year?
Throw away stuff.
I got a subscription to Babbel, and I've been doing short Spanish lessons each morning, trying to grow and learn.
That's good. It'll help you in your ministry too, don't you? Doesn't Northwood share space? That's awesome. What's one fun fact that we should know about you? You guys gotta be quicker than this. It's rapid fire.
I'm so particular on everything.
All right,
That's my fun
this is a deep fun fact. My great grandmother was a missionary to Africa, to Ghana, to Kenya, to many different places. Throughout her travels, she met a young man. She was super impressed with him. She got some of her missionary friends together. They got together. They sponsored him. They helped him to move to the United States. They helped him enroll in university. While he was there, he got married, had a child, and that child became our 44th president.
What?
What?
Yeah, she's mentioned in Dreams of Our Father, which is actually where I learned that story.
Wow. That's pretty cool, Chris. Holding back on the daggone info.
You just happen to have an Obama connection, but okay, let's just wait for the end for that one.
It's a very loose generational connection.
Doesn't get him anywhere, trust me. Just a fun fact.
In fact, my mom had a nativity set that her great-grandmother brought back from one of her mission trips, and she tried to send it to Obama when he was in the White House. She knew someone who worked in the West Wing, with just a note and saying kind of like, oh yeah, you mentioned my grandmother in this, and couldn't get it to him. Like they wouldn't let it through security. And so now we've got it in the note. We display it every year at Christmas. And
Very cool. Best part of being a parent?
The giggles.
I was about saying, just watching her grow and learn and develop as a person, and what a fantastic person she is.
Very good.
All that potential, right? Like,
And what does love mean to you?
God, peace and like acceptance, right? But just peace and acceptance.
I could, as a pastor, I want to go like Corinthians 13. It's like that, but that's the easy. I mean, love is everything. I mean, love is who we are. Love is what we were created to do. Love is everything. Meeting people where they are. It's
What'd you say, Heather?
So he gives the best answers. I like how he pauses for me to go first, and I'm like, something super shallow. And he's like, here's the big stuff.
Peace and acceptance was a good answer. That's a good answer. It's not everything, but it's a good answer. Well, we really appreciate you both coming on, taking some time out of your day and talking about a very important topic to both of you and being vulnerable with us. And we hope that everybody who is listening has gotten something out of it. And if you need resources, we will try to provide them. But make sure you're doing your own work too, because they did. So
one of the best pieces of advice that we were given is, if you think about adopting transracially, reach out to a friend of that race. If you don't have any friends of that race, don't adopt transracially.
Mic drop at the end. Pause. Time to hear from our sponsors. The Embracing Race podcast is sponsored by the Gen Out Youth Chorus. Gen Out is an outreach ensemble of the Gay Men's Chorus of Washington, D.C. Gen Out's mission is to give young LGBTQ+ and allied youth a voice to connect to the community. The ensemble is open to all singers between the ages of 13 and 18. For more information, contact www.gmcw.org. Isn't it our hope that we could come together as a society across the chasm of race and become the beloved community that Dr. King imagined? Interwoven Congregation's mission is to organize and support partnerships between faith communities with different racial compositions in order to foster racial justice and healing. For more information, visit interwovencongregations.org. HOD Records. It is not HOD, but it is HOD, no periods in between. HOD Records is a talent and artist development company that specializes in artistry development, and content creation. Serving the DMV and beyond, HOD creates a family-centered management style that promotes a collaborative spirit. Check out HOD Records on all social media platforms and visit hodrecords.media for more information. Thank you all to our sponsors.
The Embracing Race podcast, hosted by Elders Shawnee McElwain and Jesse Littlejohn, tackles all topics from pop culture to faith and the intersectionality of white supremacy and racism. Nothing is off limits, as we hope to educate and transform with radical love. For more information, visit us at embracingrace.online or on Instagram at embracing_race_podcast. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast, or if you would like to submit a comment or question, please email embracingracepodcast@gmail.com.